Well, this is a bit of an oddity, isn't it? Enormous flanges, the most plasticky looking body of all time, and a two-axle caboose to boot. Well, this train set came about as an interesting collaboration and has some very strange design features. Let's take a close look at the HO scale train set offered by Cragstan, but produced by Distler in the 1960s. Cragstan is the main name attached to this train set, but it's actually the result of a collaboration between them and Johann Distler. Distler was a German-based toy company that got started making tin toys and trains sometime in the early 1900s, and they would produce toys until the mid-60s in Western Germany, when they would cease production. Now, Cragstan was a Japanese tin toy manufacturer that sold tin toys in the 50s and 60s. They never really entered the model train market, even though they had a fair amount of trains. They never had one that ran on HO scale track, except for this one. This was not Distler's first import. It's one of the few Distler products I found that was mostly plastic, however. It's oddly similar to a tin set offered by Stracco at the same time, featuring a switching locomotive, boxcar, gondola, and caboose, and they both came bundled with the exact same track. Interesting. So let's start up front with the locomotive. It's not a prototypical model by any means, but it generally follows the style and proportions of EMD's SW series of locomotives. The most notable feature of this locomotive is the molded truck side, so a lot of people would probably assume it's a two-axle unit with the center two axles both being driven. Well, it's a four-axle unit with the front and rear axles being articulated much like the Mark's Alco S2. Inside the locomotive sits a die-cast chassis with a motor and rubber band drive. I slapped some orthodontic bands in just like I did for the old little rascal. The rubber bands are the only things holding the wheels onto the locomotive, since the axles slot directly into a hole in the chassis on one side and is free floating in the other. The rest of the locomotive is mostly plastic, including the front and rear wheel sets. The only metal part of this locomotive on the body is the sheet metal handrails that are stamped with Western Germany. There are two versions of this locomotive, a black and red version and the blue and gray one I have here. There's not much to talk about with these cars, so I'll just talk about them all at once. All three of these cars are almost all plastic except for the trucks. Now, I've seen plastic trucks with plastic wheels before. I've seen plastic trucks with metal wheels before. And I've also seen metal trucks with metal wheels. So how about sheet metal trucks with plastic wheels? Never seen this before, and it's quite interesting. The wheels are on a metal axle, but that axle is part of the truck itself, and the axle has holes that slot into it. Very strange. The trucks also have their couplers directly mounted to them, which makes sense for a set like this. The caboose is the exception, as it is a two-axle design for some reason, even though the box very clearly shows a four-axle design. The couplers are mounted on the decks of the front and the rear of this one and are allowed to pivot freely both side to side and up and down. Now, when I say that these cars are plastic, I don't mean that these are like 80s Bachmann plastic. Those at least had metal weights to them. These are literally all plastic apart from the trucks and couplers. Chassis is plastic, body is plastic, and the roof on the boxcar is plastic. It's not a bad thing in the slightest. The metal trucks keep the train on the track, and the plastic used feels incredibly sturdy and would definitely hold up to the rigors of playtime. The caboose was red regardless of what set you got, and the alternate version of this set came with a yellow boxcar and a blue gondola. Now, the box for this version of the set shows all the cars and locomotive lettered for real-world railroads. I cannot find any evidence of the set ever coming with any lettering, and the black and red version of this set has no lettering at all. The set uses an ingenious hook and eye system with the metal couplers being bent up slightly to accommodate each other. It works really well, and the sheet metal designs mean that any damage done to the couplers can simply be reversed by bending them back. Now, this set came with its own track, but I only own the train. One look at the flanges on this train and I knew it was not going to navigate switches on my layout. Now, what I was not expecting was that this was incompatible with even code 100. So I had to break out the March track in order to run this thing. I cut up the terminal section so that the flanges would clear, and this set was only ever intended to run on battery power, as it included a small battery pack that would be connected to the track. Of course, I do not own this battery pack, so I'm going to use a regular Bachmann power pack, and it runs really well. The motor is beautifully smooth, the train tracks incredibly well, and the locomotive has zero issue muscling its short consists around the track. This set originally would have included an oval with 12 curves and 2 straights, as well as a set of paper accessories like people and buildings. There's not really much to this set. It's a simple train set intended to do happy little circles in the playroom and very little else. It's not a hard set to find, they pop up on eBay quite often. It's not a bad train set by any means. It's well built and reliable, looks decent, and has a interesting history behind it, but its incompatibility with other HO scale trains really holds it back from true greatness.